This presentation, titled The Now of Auditing and Certification in the Age of Hyperconvergence, comes to us from Harry van Enckevort and Andrew Bains. Harry is a science and technology advisor to Assure Quality Limited, leading the process to identify and bring relevant new science, technology, and digital applications into the organization, its strategies, and planning. Andrew is the president and CEO of Exemplar Global. He has more than 30 years of experience spanning the food industry, auditing and conformity assessment, and international business development in several parts of the world. Andrew has also served on advisory and standard-setting groups with governmental agencies. And with that, take it away, Harry and Andrew.
Thanks, Mike. I spend some time every day on horizon scanning in the science and tech and digital world. This is generally looking past what I'm going to call this afternoon's incremental innovation or finding a better way to do something. Instead, I look to tomorrow's horizon, if not that of the day after tomorrow. The Germans have a couple of good words for this, the first being morgen früh, tomorrow morning, and übermorgen, the day after tomorrow. In the most recent of the seminar series 6 months ago, I was going to provide some of my thoughts and questions on what I saw rapid advances in science and tech and digital capabilities might mean for auditing and certification, and why we do it and how we do it. It was going to be a look into the future, a future I saw as a real possibility, coming ever closer in time, reality, and with speed. But well, time overtook me and I had too much to do in the usual ways. I didn't get it done, and so I'm here today. And in the meantime, this happened. My crystal ball became contaminated by a virus and it changed the world. A new reality came into play and a new imperative. And I think that the possible future I was wondering about for auditing and certification is actually now ever more likely to become a reality. And so I started off calling my presentation The Future of Auditing and Certification in the Age of Hyperconvergence. But I've had to cross out that future and put now. So my name is Harry van Enckevort, and it's a great pleasure to be here and to be able to contribute to this program again. And not only that, to be doing so together with the President and CEO of Exemplar Global, Andrew Bains. We want to show you today that the new possible world, of that new possible world, and invite, if not actually incite, your thinking about auditing and certification in a changed world, and one that I think will change even faster now. Andrew.
Thank you, Harry. Like Harry, we at Exemplar Global have known for some time that change was coming for audits and assurance, and that opportunities to use technology and AI and so on would gradually come on stream, and that there was an inevitability about these tools beginning to be used. However, in considering this, we never imagined for a minute that a pandemic might come along and change our world. By now, most of you will have considered remote auditing, and its pros and cons will have been well discussed. But we believe that's only the start of the possibilities. Harry's presentation today is exceptionally well timed, and as you listen to it, I encourage you all to consider what does this mean for us, and in fact to also consider what could it mean for us. Harry, thank you.
So let's build the picture and kick off the challenge and the opportunities to be had by you all, if not asked of you, on the how and the why of auditing and insurance in a new world. A world of new business models and new operating models that are offered by hyperconvergence and a dramatically collapsed timescale, one that is real time or near real time. And if you don't already know what hyperconvergence means and offers, I trust this presentation will clarify that for you. When I look at advances in science and tech, there seem to be four overarching themes. the what we can do, where, when, how fast, and what can do it. And this is about being at line, that is in situ, being in line, that is within the process, and being online, that is connected. These four themes have essentially driven the development and advances of the cyber-physical systems of the fourth industrial revolution, or Industry 4.0, as it's known by some. At the same time, there have also been advances in computing and the development of cloud-based connectivity and systems that have allowed much broader connectivity and the ability to collect data and to collate it. And this in turn has allowed rapid advances in the speed at which we can analyze data and also the increased capability of data sciences. This is a story about not only working within a single data set, but also mining data and interpreting data within a curated group of data sets. By curated, I mean much like one pulls together an art exhibition of individual pieces to build and tell a bigger story. That is a story that's not just about people's expertise, however, but also that of the computers themselves and advanced programming. Because yes, we do have computing systems that can seemingly learn without being explicitly programmed and constrained by what people would notice or think or predict, so-called artificial intelligence. One of my favourite stories of curated data analysis relates to the horsemeat scandal of Europe some years ago. You may remember it. It has since been shown that the scandal could have been predicted if, at the time, data analysts had looked across laboratory, meat demand, particularly beef and horse, economic data, and supply chain data sets. Some of you may recall my last seminar, which I did jointly with tech partner Lance Balfield of Company X, where we described our pilot trial of the RealWear wearable, hands-free, voice-controlled, connected computer, which had its own built-in microphone, camera, video, and phone. And we talked about using this for an end-to-end audit process. Its capabilities included being able to view data laid real-time over the real world, or what is known as the so-called augmented reality. Interestingly, this tech, together with tablets and products like Microsoft Teams and LibreSteam, and even a cell phone on a stick connected through Skype, is now well grounded for in situ and at a distance or remote auditing and inspections. In fact, the cell phone on a stick approach has already been approved by regulators here in New Zealand for some remote auditing and certification. And you can watch this on YouTube on the URL that's come up at the bottom of the slide. But more exciting perhaps, the RealWear system became available a few months ago with a thermal imaging camera to view and measure the body temperatures of moving people. And through a simple programmed decision-making process, support the wearer developing a conclusion on the risk a person poses in the COVID-19 world. And in July this year, I'm going to be starting a project using image analysis and machine learning techniques to see if we can assist our meat inspectors in abattoirs. These guys do disease and defect detection and identification in the carcasses of slaughtered animals. If successful, the intention is to deploy this intelligence onto the RealWear device that our wearers will be using while they're doing their meat inspection in the abattoirs. The intriguing thing here, of course, is that we people think we are the experts. So, in this particular pilot, rather than using a feature-driven program where we tell the computer what to look for, we will use an autonomous deep learning model. So the computer can see and decide things that humans wouldn't necessarily be able to see or do or recognize, because of the computer's capability to collate and compare huge numbers of images much faster than we ever could or our memories could handle. But back to today's story of the meaning of hyperconvergence and its relevance to auditing. An example of the advances in science and tech has been the proliferation of sensors and measurement devices applicable for diverse applications. And these things are continuing to be developed at pace. We have remote temperature, movement, geolocation, water level, water quality, VAT levels, irrigation sensors, soil nutrients, chemical detections, in-stomach animal boluses, pest detection, multispectral and hyperspectral cameras, handheld detecting devices, and so on. These are just examples of a few of these devices in the agri-food space. Maybe you even have watches and clothing and apps on your cell phone, sort of examples of others. Interestingly, these devices are also increasingly connected to external decision support software. They're not just to be a data source, but to provide information and insight. I'm going to start today with an example of cattle on a farm wearing a device providing a farmer with geolocation, temperature, and movement data. And ask you to note that each of these aspects has its positive information and its negative information. An example of the positive is, for example, the animal is here, and the negative information is the animal is not there. So our data set is bigger than we might actually imagine. I'm using this ear tag example because it's geolocating through a low Earth orbit satellite. The tag has an RFID in it, a temperature, and an accelerometer. In fact, pilots of this tag are already taking place in Australia by the proprietors of this tech series tag. So back to the tag. We might, for example, I'm wondering whether we can obtain data and insights related to the animal's health and welfare, behaviours relative to the farm's environmental plan and the farm's assurance program, all things that assure quality, audits and verifies. And we know that these things are the concerns of many consumers. So if we know the data at this point on the farm, we can, as this segmented supply and value chain shows, then immediately ask, what are the implications downstream to right before the farm gate, or the implications all the way upstream to the consumer, because we have this device on cows on a farm. Wrapped around this data then is the assurance data provided by people like yourselves, the compliance with standards, regulations, claims, values, statements, certifications. And all of this data is feeding into what I'm going to call digital or informatics central, the repository of data silos, database silos, from which data analytics can occur. So we're collecting and collating data here. And then what we have is hyperconvergence, science and technology converging with data and on into the data sciences and analytics. Interestingly, this hyperconvergence then provides us with feedback loops and the ability to talk to any party up or down the supply and value chains via these connected devices on what is an Internet of Things. And in that way, we can, for example, better enable people to optimize production, transform services and products, and better understand customers. If, for example, you had a connected and smart label on your product, you might, for example, adjust your best buy date and your use by dates real time for optimal product safety, quality, or nutritional value. But what you also get through this approach, and what is important, is that you have the ability to build the digital twin of any business. That is, you can take a physical asset, convert it to a digital asset. You can take a physical process and convert it to a digital process and model the business end to end. So this system provides you with feedback loops so you can do what-if experiments and test, predict, and tweak your business in virtual reality and in real time. And there's no extended wait to see and hope for a positive financial consequence. You might ask, is this reality? Well, for sure it is. The building blocks of intra-segment or inter-segment Internet of Things connectivity is already available and in use, whether through a small startup or all those businesses going right through to the megalists like Microsoft and AWS. I haven't yet heard of end-to-end connectivity in a chain such as I've detailed, but I do know that one of Assure Quality's businesses, a vertically integrated horticultural business, is working on building the digital twin of their business end-to-end, and for those purposes I describe. In truth, the AirTag I mentioned earlier also has on-tag analysis capabilities. More and more sensors are being increasingly built with algorithms in their programming, and they're creating what we call smart devices. So by taking advantages of these smart devices, the feedback loops, and the ability of advanced computer systems and artificial intelligence to mine and crunch seemingly disparate or unconnected data sets like I described for the horse meat scandal earlier, we are in fact building intelligence into our supply and value chains. And our Internet of Things becomes an Internet of smart things. In other words, we can start to define a value proposition for the fourth industrial revolution or for Food 4.0 that goes beyond the efficiency advantages of cyber-physical systems. Because at any time, we'll be able to talk to any part of the supply and value chain through our digital twins, through an Internet of smart things, and through artificial intelligence. And in my mind, what we end up with then is the value proposition that is real-time risk and opportunity management for a business, to protect its brands, to improve trust with their suppliers and their customers and their consumers. And of course, what I've talked about there was a meat supply chain and a meat value chain, but the segmented approach is entirely agnostic to the type of food or its production systems, whether we're talking dairy or nuts and legumes, insects, aquaculture, plant-based foods and foods produced by fermentation, whether by a yeast or an algae or fungi that is genetically engineered or not, foods that are printed and cultured meats. The approach is equally applicable in the shorter the supply chain and in vertically integrated businesses will, I think, get there first for reasons of simplicity and shorter supply chains and their data sovereignty. My overwhelming sense from Horizon scanning has been that what was once the fictional future, coming closer and inexorably as it always does, and increasingly faster, is in fact here. But what if we could dreams of so many ideas have moved from proofs of concept on to proofs of application with so many areas of science, tech and digital advances? but they have become the building blocks of what I now see as a realistic and likely future. Those increasingly intelligent supply and value chains powered by digital twins and AI using real-time data move to reality. The objective of today's presentation is for Andrew and I, but mostly Andrew, to start asking questions like, what could this mean for auditing? What will assurance mean in this afternoon's or tomorrow morning's and the day after tomorrow's marketplace of consumers, customers and businesses? With their always-on, digital, real-time, data-driven operating and business decision-making models. And so here it is, I hand over to Andrew.
Thank you, Harry. It is indeed fascinating stuff, and whether we like it or not, these are the very pertinent questions that our profession faces. Will this be the end of auditing as we know it, or is this in fact our brave new world? Harry's example is illustrated in the food and primary sector, but similar technology can, and I venture to suggest will, disrupt whatever sector you work in. As I mentioned in my opening comments, by now most of you will have had to consider what are the pros and cons of remote auditing. Now, by remote auditing, we tend to mean doing an audit in the same form and style as we do now, but at a distance. And technology allows us to do that now and has done for some time. But what about virtual auditing? That's not the same thing as remote auditing. Now, traditionally, audits are undertaken in order to gather information. So that information can be used to consider what confidence we might have in an organisation and its products or services. On the basis of that confidence, we might issue a certificate, or we might require some action to be taken to correct or improve. But what if you consider all of that data that Harry's outlined has been available? How could we use that information to gain that confidence? And if we legitimately had access to that information, would you still solely rely on a sample based on a couple of days on the site? Or might you take a much wider, real-time, holistic look at the auditee and draw your conclusions on that breadth of data? So, for tomorrow's auditors, will you require the same skill sets as we have now and have had for the last decades? Or will new skill sets be required to access, analyse and interpret, and then disseminate the data? Will the technology and AI be your ally and augment your skills, or will it in fact be your replacement? For today's auditors and assurance professionals, as most of you listening to this will be, I'd suggest this is the time to accept that this is here with us and begin to look for ways to learn and develop new skills to harness these powerful tools, to present them positively, not as Big Brother, and to see the possibilities of adding value through audit and assurance, a challenge we've faced for many years. For example, can assurance become predictive in the way that Harry outlined? Can we see what might happen down the supply chain and therefore be a valuable asset for organisations with auditors, the pilot of the technology, if you will? How will a certification body remain relevant? How will the CB add value in the process to stop itself from becoming just a stamp at some point along that supply or value chain? Can they, in fact, become the agents of these positive services? I'm certainly of the belief that they can. What will be the impact on regulators and standard-setting bodies? Harry referred earlier to an example in New Zealand where the regulator has already accepted remote auditing. Can and will they adapt to demand the use of this technology? To me, it seems inevitable. If it's there to be used, it will be. Whether that's now or later, it will be. Could man, technology, and artificial intelligence work together, something like cobots, human and robot pairs working together? And here's an interesting one. If we did that, which of you would be the lead auditor and ultimate decision maker? For what it's worth, I think an auditor and on-site visit will still have irreplaceable value. but I do see that it could become just one tool in the box a CB employs, perhaps deploying field auditors in a forensic way, where seeing the whites of the eyes is considered important and where a specific objective is sought. Personally, I suspect, though, that the skills an auditor will have in the future might more resemble those we consider now as being the skills of business or intelligence analysts. And when you think about it, they also gather data and analyse it and make recommendations. So how different are we? So whether you're a first, second or third party auditor, this has implications for your sector, for your company, for you and for your career possibilities. And if you're a trainer, I'll ask you the question of how are you preparing to train these skills into our auditors of the future? Harry.
Thanks, Andrew. Just to pick up on a point you made there, I've just jogged my memory that predictive assurance. I did read recently that an AI system was being used to predict which of a franchisee's shops would fail for what reason and when. I haven't got the details on that, but I thought it was an interesting idea. So clearly the value, the data, and looking back and looking today and looking into the future in the auditing sense is quite possible. So I hope today that Andrew and I have been able to give you a glimpse of what the future might hold for auditing and certification. And Andrew asked a number of questions that will need to be asked and resolved. I hope that in my part, I've been able to show you that the future that was a fiction has actually already become a reality. Smart devices, machine vision and learning, artificial intelligence, digital twins, real-time inputs and outputs. I think the COVID-19 situation has amplified the chorus of need and calls for change. It also provides opportunity. After all, who and which businesses thought of building pandemics into reasons for the development and application of advanced systems, and including them into their strategies and their operating and their business models? Or what the impact on the world of assurance would be? I suspect innovation, science, technology, digital systems, the innovation in these is only going to escalate from here. And the tech and capabilities of what I've talked about today will be old before we even know it. So I'm going to leave you with an image of my new crystal ball and say, thanks for listening to us. Go safely. Time is short, and just to paraphrase Star Trek slightly, and the Borg, resistance may well be futile. Thank you.
And thank you, Harry van Enckevort and Andrew Bains, for that expert look at the age of hyperconvergence as it relates to the world of auditing. And that concludes this presentation.